This video begins in 2002, and the sheet that you should have in front of you starts with January and the fact that a TV network called TV6 is closed by court order for failure to pay its utility bills. This is the television network that Boris Berezovsky was the majority stakeholder in. The government acted because Boris Berezovsky had become a critic of the Putin government, and this was a bit of government payback. Berezovsky is in London at the time, so he can't be arrested, and he's claiming asylum in London. He owns property there, has a big house there. But this is again the government going after any of the oligarchs that refuse to accept Putin's social contract with them. Also in that month, the railway minister is fired by President Putin because the Duma, the parliament, has been investigating him, and they claim, the Duma committee claims that he had fixed the rates on the railways to benefit companies that were owned by his son and his nephew. And Putin saw an opportunity here to again take a stand against corruption. And because it was going to become public, he takes action against this minister. In the spring of 2002, we see a major shakeup in the Duma. Now, if you go back to the last Duma election, you saw that Unity, this new party, had a substantial number of votes, but still was nowhere near a majority. The Duma was controlled by the communists still and the liberal Democrats, and they had made some trade-offs. There were some committees that Unity had chairmanship of the various committees. This was a deal that was all cut in the Duma. But now, after the latest election, the fact that Fatherland Russia is now merging with Unity to create this new party, United Russia, that is going to become a dominant party of power. And again, refer back to the articles in the Sakwa book and the last video I made about commentating on the articles about the role of parties and the role of parliament. That's all discussed in there. Here you have the United Russia taking a vote within the committees and reassigning most of the committee chairs to members of United Russia. And the fact that the Speaker of the Duma, a communist member, Zeleznyov, went along with this coup almost, the Communist Party of the Russian Federation expels him, and he becomes overnight a member of, surprise, United Russia. All right? Then we look at the events in August of the summer of 2002, this enormous, horrendous helicopter crash. An Army helicopter, an Mi-26, designed to carry 80 passengers, also called the cow because it's so big and has a big belly for passengers. It crashes into a minefield in Chechnya. And between the crash and the survivors trying to get through the minefield, 140 Russian soldiers are killed in this disaster. Also, towards the end of the month, Putin issues a decree outlining a code of conduct for public officials. Imagine that the government has to say that they expect that they require that all public officials obey the law, that they serve the public and act efficiently and courteously towards the public. And finally, they must avoid conflict of interest. Amazing. This is part of what I think is the sham process of Putin speaking against corruption, because he knows that this is an issue that impacts every Russian citizen. They're all fed up and frustrated by the petty corruption. You take bribes to your professors. Oh, that's not such a bad idea. No. You take often, in want to get into a school, you pay something. You go to the hospitals, you take something, flowers, chocolates, something to be sure that your loved one who's in the hospital gets more attention than somebody who just walks in off the street and doesn't have anything to provide to the staff. These kind of petty things are going on, and it's frustrating to the Russians. And then we have another event in August, an apartment explosion that again spreads lots of rumors that the Chechens are behind this. This one, though even the government ultimately admits, is the result of a gas leak. But many Russians don't believe that. In October, we have one of these major attacks by the Chechen rebels in the heart of Moscow. Between 40 and 50 Chechen rebels on October 23rd carry weapons under their coats into a theater where there's a very popular musical playing. And they seize control of this theater and have under their control about 850 hostages. Now, the government then has to face the fact that these Chechens publish demands. You can imagine, what are those demands? First one, the end of the Second Chechen War. The third, the withdrawal of all Russian forces from Chechnya. And fourth, Russia's acceptance of Chechnya as an independent nation, not a part of the Russian Federation. Well, Putin's government is not going to agree to these. So they begin a slow process of negotiating with the hostages and then asking for some food to be sent in and allowing certain people to go to be released. And the hostage takers release between 150 and 200 of their captives, mostly small children and elderly people. And the negotiations are going back and forth. The next day, the 24th, two women who want to negotiate the settlement are shot. The next day, there are about 40 hostages freed. That same day, a woman tries to break into the theater, searching for her son, and she's shot by the hostage takers. About another 50 more are freed by the hostage takers. But the government is fed up. This has been going on for several days. They want to end the siege, and they come up with a plan to pump a odorless gas into the theater with the expectation that it's a sleeping agent, and that the gas will knock out the hostages as well as the hostage takers, and then the Russian special forces can break down the doors and come in and capture the hostage takers and release the hostages from this siege. This takes place on the 26th of October. And unfortunately, the gas has some unexpected consequences. Many of the hostage takers are knocked out by the gas, but not all. And many of the hostages fall asleep and succumb to the gas. And when these special forces break in, they have to fight a gun battle with the remaining hostage takers that are still awake. The upshot of it is that all of the hostage takers are killed by the government. Even those that were unconscious, they were killed point blank, bullets to the head. But all the hostage takers were killed. And after the special forces gained control of the building, you have these television cameras showing people staggering out, falling down in the lobby, falling down in the street, gasping for air. And the government has poorly prepared for this. They don't have enough ambulances to take these people who have succumbed to the gas to the hospitals. They have to commandeer some school buses that are nearby and put people on these buses, but that means they're sitting up straight and their head falls back. They're often dying of their own vomit. The upshot of it is that 130 hostages are killed by the gas after the theater siege is lifted. And when they're taken to the hospitals, the doctors in the emergency rooms are pleading with the government, tell us what you use so we can figure out we know the antidote to use. And the government refuses to disclose this. It's a state secret. So that many people die in the hospital because the uh, the health professionals have no idea how to counteract the effects of this. And this is a real problem that shows how the war is creating problems and how ineffectively the government has been dealing with them. But Putin doesn't want to hear that. His government spokesperson has come out and denied that people died because of the gas, despite the fact that there was video broadcast on Russian television showing that. They claim that the government was well prepared and had adequate number of ambulances, etc., denying the reality that many people saw. But it's constantly, you don't say anything bad about Putin and his regime. 2 days after the siege is lifted on the 28th of October, um, Putin initiates a policy that we will call Chechenization. 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 This is modeled after the policy that the United States under Richard Nixon initiated at the end of the Vietnam War, called Vietnamization. When the Nixon administration said America has done enough, we have defeated the efforts of the North Vietnamese to conquer the South, and the remaining war has to be now fought by the Vietnamese people. The United States would continue to provide air cover for the Vietnamese soldiers, but the war was going to be fought by the Vietnamese. And a few years later, the North and their allies overran the South Vietnamese government, and you have a united South Vietnam. The problem, so what Putin proposes is that they will slowly withdraw Russian troops from Chechnya, still provide air cover, provide military equipment to the new Chechen government that is led by uh, the son of the former Mufti who had declared jihad against the Russians, family named Kadyrov, Ahmed Kadyrov, and he will lead the campaign in Chechnya against the guerrillas, but it'll be Chechen on Chechen. And so this begins this process of Russian withdrawal and the beginning of the process whereby the Chechen government acts almost independently of the central government as long as the Chechen government remains loyal to Putin. All right, now we move to 2003. The principal events there we have to focus upon was in March, an anti-drug agency established because drug abuse is a real problem in Russia. And Putin expands the powers of the FSB uh, to creates this drug agency, and also in his struggles with the oligarchs, he transfers enforcement of tax policy from a separate tax police to the equivalent of their IRS to the Interior Ministry to give it more force and more professionalism. All right, and in May, the Chechens adopt a new constitution, setting up this new government under Kadyrov, and the Duma passes an anti-corruption law. It's the first anti-corruption law that's passed in post-Soviet Russia. It defines what a corrupt act is. It defines bribery. It extends criminal liability uh, in a wider swath. Top officials are supposed to make public all of their financial records so that this would avoid conflict of interest. And this also May is the celebration of the 300th anniversary of the establishment of St. Petersburg, or what the people in St. Petersburg called Pieta. So St. Petersburg's 300th anniversary is a big event, and because of this close operation of Putin and Bush and the war on terror, Bush goes there, it's a big celebration, etc. And so that's a real plus. But we need to talk about the upcoming uh, Duma elections that's going to take place in December. But before we get there, we flip the page and we look at June 2003, which is the beginning of the Yukos affair. Now I have to back up and explain what Yukos is. Yukos is, or was, the world's largest non-state-owned oil company. It produced 20% of Russian oil production. And the majority of stocks were held by a man named Mikhail Khodorkovsky. And Khodorkovsky was one of those early oligarchs. You find it back on that chart that I gave you on the Yeltsin years. He was as corrupt as any of them. Famously, he had been working with an American investor, and the American investor wanted to know when the shareholders meeting would be held, and he was given information to go to a certain city in Russia on a certain date. He flies in there. Nobody knows anything about a stockholders meeting because it's held in a different city where this Western stockholder has no input into the events. These are the kind of things that were done routinely in the early days of establishing capitalism in Russia. However, by the time Putin becomes president, Khodorkovsky is trying to clean up his act and making his company, Yukos, much more transparent and much more accommodating of Western uh, investors and Western economic expectations. But Khodorkovsky has been using his money to fund many members in the State Duma. Members of all different parties, even the Communist Party members, are taking money from Khodorkovsky. And that is getting into politics, which is again a violation of Putin's supposed social contract with the oligarchs. And Khodorkovsky also has been pushing an oil pipeline to China, as opposed to other pipelines that the government has been pushing. So he is violating the social contract. He's pushing alternative policies for the government, and he thinks he is untouchable because he is one of the richest men in the world. And the regime begins by criticizing him in the press, and eventually, in October, Khodorkovsky is arrested, charged with tax fraud. I'll spell his name for you: Mikhail, Mikhail, Mikhail Khodorkovsky, Khodorkovsky, Khodorkovsky. 16th richest man in the world, the richest man in Russia, is arrested in October. But let's go back to July. The chief financial officer of the defense ministry is arrested and convicted of misappropriation of $450 million in funds, using it to his private benefit. Um, this is part of the endemic corruption, and because it's being investigated, Putin takes actions and pushes him out, and he is eventually convicted. In July, there is a rock concert in Moscow. A number of people were killed by a suicide bomber. The suicide bomber is one of the so-called black widows, women whose husbands were killed in the war in Chechnya. These are Chechen women, Islamic women married to Chechen supposed freedom fighters or terrorists who have been killed. They go into the concert, uh, not in burqas, obviously not, but with long skirts and coats on that nobody expects these women to be carrying bombs, and these women become suicide bombers. In October of 2003, you have presidential elections in Chechnya with Ahmed Kadyrov being elected president, Kadyrov, Kadyrov, and he becomes Putin's man in Chechnya. In December, We have the elections of for the Duma, which I sent you an overhead on that. Um, and in this election, you see the number of seats that United Russia has, 223 seats. The Communists, around 50 seats. The Liberal Democrats, 36 seats. And then you see this new party, Rodina. Rodina is a party that has been created by people around President Putin to be a pro-government but nationalist party. A party that is designed to try to draw support away from both the communists and the liberal Democrats. So Rodina has people who are supportive of the government but are take the stand of being pro-nationalist. And as a result of these December 2003 elections, you see the end of any organized liberal party in the Duma, because the threshold for representation in the Duma has been raised in that long parties from 5% to 7%. And even the liberal Yabloko party couldn't make the 5% cut. Um, so what this is also is this is the beginning of United Russia, the party of power, supporting Putin, having control of the Duma. So now Putin is got a party in the Duma that has control of the Duma, that is loyal to him. So he not only controls the presidency and the executive power of Russia, but he has his allies controlling the legislature in Russia. All right, I have a few minutes left. So let's start into 2004. 2004 is going to be a presidential year, presidential election year in Russia. Um, in February, the prime minister is fired. Surprise, surprise. The March, the presidential election is coming up. 2 weeks before that election, the end of February, Kasyanov, Putin's first prime minister, who was a carryover from President Yeltsin's administration, he is fired. He's the last of the holdovers of the Yeltsin era. And a new Minister of Finance comes in, basically a technocrat, a guy named, first name Mikhail, last name Fredkov. Is largely an outsider, thought to be more of a technocrat without any real political ambitions. He had been Russia's envoy to the EU, and there is beginning to be speculation that that Putin is bringing people in because he may think about running in the future as for a third term. So we move then to March 14th, the presidential election. So I want you to take a look at that page that I sent you. And there you have Putin nominated, not by any party. Again, Putin. This is Putin being independent of the electoral politics. But he is supported, obviously, by United Russia. And look at the percentage of vote. 71%. Now notice under the communists, it's not the perennial Gennady Zyuganov, but it is a new Communist Party candidate who, as the chart shows you, was not even a member of the Communist Party, but of an allied party, the Agrarian Party. And he only gets 13% of the vote. Now, here you have Sergei Glazyev, nominated by no party, but supported by Rodina, this party that's been created overnight to draw support from the Liberal Democrats. It was clear by 2003, the end of 2003, that when Putin ran in 2004, he was going to be elected. Because look at who the Liberal Democrats support. Not Zhirinovsky, because he knows he's not going to run for president in election. He has no opportunity to be a powerful force in, and the party gets 2% of the vote. So this is the beginning, as I said, of the impact of this vertical power that Putin has been working to, and his notion of managed democracy. He wants opposition parties, but he wants opposition parties that are going to be cooperative with the regime. And so he has helped to create this new party, Rodina. The candidate for Rodina was a member of United Russia, but joined Rodina at the urging of the Putin's allies to provide this possibility of an alternative election presence. After the election, Putin goes about establishing an anti-corruption commission in April, and this is to handle citizen complaints and to review the legislation on corruption for flaws that might invite corruption. Again, Putin constantly talks about the need to fight corruption. All the while, people close to him are becoming wealthy, and we will talk about uh, the fact that Putin's government is becoming a kleptocracy, where people who are surrounding him are all becoming wealthy. As yet, he still rails against corruption and uses corruption against any opponent that doesn't go along with him. And then in May of 2004, they pass a law on NGOs because they fear that too many of these new non-governmental organizations uh, that have been developing in Russia and other post-Soviet countries um, are too beholden to the Westerners that have been supporting them. Uh, they This law requires compulsory registration of NGOs, which the government sometimes can delay and drag out the process, sometimes rejecting the NGOs, and then they can't operate. It orders them to have no foreign employees. So all the employees have to be Russians. It requires that they disclose the source of their funds, the supposed transparency. Uh, and the reality is that many of these non-governmental organizations depend upon funds that are coming in from the West to help build civil society in the post-Soviet context. Um, there's enormous protests from abroad. The harshest of the requirements aren't enacted, um, but the limiting of foreign funds is a serious handicap. And here's why: because then they can turn around and say that these non-governmental organizations are not really operating in Russia's interest, not operating for the Russian citizens. They are operating in the interest of foreigners who are providing the financial support to them. And that is because Russia's beginning to worry about the Western interference or involvement, depending on your perspective, in Ukraine, the former Soviet Republic, now an independent country, where they're beginning to see the developments called the color revolutions, where Western um, uh, non-governmental organizations funnel funds into some of these new non-governmental organizations in the former communist regimes to try to establish a civil society, these agencies that are not under the control of the government. And these civil societies lead to the color revolutions that bring down Putin's ally in Ukraine. And um, Putin is fearful of what this can mean for the longevity of his regime. So I'm going to end with this May NGO, and then we'll take up the events in May and June of 2004 in the next video. So I'm going to end this one here, and we'll pick it up with the next page in really June 2004. All right.